to tonight's AT Live. We're so excited to have you here with us. My name is Sarah Machiko Haber. My pronouns are she, hers, and I am the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Initiatives Associate at Theater Communications Group. I'm a mixed Asian woman with shoulder-length brown hair. I'm wearing a gray shirt, and I'm sitting by a window. I'm joining you tonight from the lands of the Canarsie and the Montauk in Queens. This AT Live was inspired by the September issue of American Theater magazine, which focused on transgender and gender nonconforming, or TGNC, theater. The September issue was made in partnership with an amazing TGNC advisory council and our colleagues at American Theater magazine. American Theater magazine is a publication of Theater Communications Group, the national service organization for U.S. nonprofit theaters. Theater Communications Group is a nonpartisan organization and conducts its advocacy in bipartisan fashion. And now I'd like to hand things over to my colleague, Allison.
Hi, my name is Allison Considine. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the senior editor of American Theater magazine. I am a white woman with short brown hair. I'm wearing a purple blouse and I'm sitting in front of a cream-colored wall. I'm currently in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, on the land of the Mispaches peoples. Thank you all so much for joining us for this special edition of AT Live. American Theater began its AT Live series a few years ago as a way to connect with our readers in person and to dig deeper into the topics that are covered in our magazine. Now, please note that tonight's conversation is not live. This dialogue was taped on November 4th, 2020, just one day after the presidential election, as ballots were being counted in the backdrop of the evening. I'm now going to pass the mic on to Sierra Diane, our steadfast contributing editor who really shepherded American Theater's September issue.
Hello, my name is Sierra Diane. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I was a contributing editor for American Theater magazine's September issue. Quick visual description, I'm a Black woman with dark wavy hair. I'm wearing a black shirt, an orange blazer, and I'm sitting in front of a white wall. I'm currently joining you from the lands of the Munsee, Lenape, and Canarsie people. This exciting roundtable conversation is a continuation of some of the ideas that came up during the creation of our September issue, specifically what it means to hold both artistry and activism. This conversation is not meant to represent all TGNC folks or trans women of color, and the views expressed are solely a reflection of the individual roundtable participants. This discussion also does not in any way give cis people the right or authority to speak on transness. We encourage you to listen to these brilliant women, uplift their work, and reflect on how you can act in solidarity with the TGNC community. Tonight, we're joined by the incredible roundtable guests, Merrique Jenson, Lady Dane Figueroa Edidi, Lila Star Escada, and Nyla Foster. These exuberant women hold so much talent, love, ferocity, and generosity of spirit. So, without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to our lovely moderator, Merrique, for our AT Live Roundtable.
Hi, everyone. Ladies, I'm so excited to have you all here and to be doing this conversation specifically focused on trans women of color and uplifting Black and Latinx women and our experiences as artists, performers, and educators. I want to kick it off with starting with intros. So I'll go ahead and continue the conversation and the intros that we saw earlier. My name is Merrique Jenson. I use she, her pronouns. I am the director of Social Scope Productions, a multimedia equity and design company focused on uplifting marginalized voices and communities and providing professional development coaching. I've been involved with LGBT youth organizing and anti-violence work for almost 20 years. I identify and I sort of also appear as a light-skinned multiracial woman. Specifically, I'm a second-generation Mexican-American and white. I also identify as a transgender woman of color. I'm wearing pink lip gloss. I have medium black hair and a 1980s looking babysitter pink and blue turtleneck with matching fabric blue earrings. I am on stolen land of the Kansa, Osage, and Kickapoo people, now also known as Olathe, Kansas. So I want to go ahead and turn it over to Nyla to continue.
Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be here. My name is Nyla Foster. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm affiliated with a lot of organizations and hold a lot of titles. I am the National Director for Trans Women of Color Collective. I also have my own company, which is Nyla Foster Productions, which is a multidisciplinary art company, really dealing with performance, writing, film, all that stuff. I am also a lead advisor for Transformation, which is the leading transgender expansive group for youth in Kansas City. Also, the current Miss Black Trans International, and I'm a board member of the LGBTQ Workers Center, which does a lot of movement work for equality for LGBTQ workers. So I have a lot of colors in my hair. I have roots, I have a little bit of auburn. I have like some platinum blonde rogue highlights with a medium brown under low light thing going on. And I have like a black and white mock top, and I have a signature ear necklace. And the land currently, I am in Fort Lauderdale, which is stolen land from the Taino tribe, Tequesta, and Seminole. And I'll pass it off to Lady Dane.
Ow! Hey everybody, Lady Dane Figueroa Edidi. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a performance artist, a choreographer, a playwright, an author. I've got 14 books published. Work! I am the co-editor of the Black Trans Prayer Book and also the co-director. I have a small little organization called the Anonymity Initiatives, which is an arts organization that produces and curates events that center trans and gender nonconforming people of color. Oh my goodness. So my description, honey. So I am Black, Nigerian, Cuban, and Indigenous trans woman. I have brown skin. I have on big old hoop earrings, honey. Think about the 80s. I've got a puffy sweater on, along with alekes, and my hair is dark and it's pulled back in a bun. It's snatched back. I've got some red lipstick on, some cute eyeliner, giving a cute cat eye. And I am in what we call DC, but we understand that is the land of the Piscataway peoples. So I'm like, wait, hold on. It's only 4 of us on this call, y'all. Hey, Layla or Lila?
Lila.
How Lila. Go ahead, Lila. I was like, hold on.
That's okay. Well,
Lo
hello there.
siento, sister.
Estoy aquí viviendo. I'm Lila Star Escada. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a full-time showgirl, singer, rapper, and actress, and I reside in Chicago, and I'm in the comfort of my closet surrounded by all the glam. I'm wearing a long sleeve black t-shirt with my hair parted on the side with a very slick baby hair in the color dark blonde. I come to you from the land of Borinquen Taino, but I am sitting here in Chicago, Illinois.
Come on, descriptions. That was fun. I love that. I love that. I felt like it was really, really great to hear about all of the amazing stuff that you all are doing. I mean, okay, so this is like, we are a badass group of women. Like, I just want to give props already for like the 4 of us being together on this call and getting to share about our work. I am so excited to dive in and do this. And so I just wanted to start with something that I feel like, like when I think of being an artist and I think of who I saw growing up, that was my inspiration, that that I could relate to, For me, I remember thinking of Chichi Rodriguez from Tu Wong Fu and seeing her and like identifying with aspects of her. Or I always think of Pedro Zamora because I didn't transition until 2 years ago. And I remember thinking of Pedro and seeing him on the Real World San Francisco. And so I am curious for you all, for you ladies, for Lila, Lady Dane and Nyla, who are your inspirations as a performer and artist growing up? Who did you see on screen or in the theater that your spirit connected with? So whoever wants to sort of jump in and start. And I would love also if we could ask each other questions, that this isn't something that we just ask the question and we answer. If there's something we share that we're like, I want to know more about that, let's go there, right? So whoever wants to start with that question.
I'll start. I'd say I have a few inspirational artists who like activated that desire to do that. I would say Aaliyah, Dana Houghton, rest in peace. Also, this is going to be kind of superficial, but Vanity. I know she didn't have like a really big career. She's like a preacher now, but I don't know what it is about the Last Dragon, like her doing that number. It was amazing. And also, just outside of like mainstream art, more so queer art, a lot of pageantry entertainers, Mimi Marks, Monica Moreau, Paris France, just a lot of beautiful trans women who are artists, because I know that I eventually would be a trans woman, and I saw that, wow, there's a lane for you. You might not make it on TV, or you can, because things have changed. We're not just reduced to drag clubs or, the Chitlin circuit. We could be wherever, but not saying that those things are not don't mean anything. But yeah, those are a few for me.
I love it. I love it. And Nyla, you came out really young, right, as a trans woman, or really as a trans girl. Like, how old did you come out as?
I came out at 13. I was outed by a friend's mom, and then I transitioned around 14 and a half and went back and forth. But at 15, it's been that. I've been Nyla for a long time. Honestly, I don't even have a picture of me pre-transition, and folks don't even know that part. Like, you have to really know me to even like know my dead name or even know what I look like. I'm 32 now, so wow, damn. Seems like yesterday though.
Yeah, I was identifying. I thought of that when you said you're naming your artist, because for me, I didn't. Like I said, I didn't come out till 2 years ago, and I'm 36. So, it was, for me, it was a lot of like gay male representation that were really effeminate that I could see myself in. So thanks for sharing that, Lady Dane. What about you? Who did you see as an inspiration or artist, or performer growing up that inspired you?
Well, I will say this. I want to toss it to Lila, so because you were gonna say something, right, Lila? And I think
don't trust me. It's okay. I'm just always ready to talk.
So I'm like, go ahead, girl, go ahead. I'll go after you.
No, you can go.
Are you sure?
Promise.
All right. So, oh gosh, my inspirations. Well, I will first start with the women in my family, of course. And my mama, my aunties, my auntie Jimmy, who was a showgirl back in the day, and I remember seeing a picture of her in the family photo, and I said, "Who's that? Who's that white woman?" She was real light skinned, and my mom was like, "Child, that's Jimmy." And and I write a lot about my aunt Jimmy, and a lot of my work, along with my mom and my aunt Liz, who was an academic and a artist. She was a jazz singer, and she toured up and down the East Coast with her husband, Bill Bird. And she was also an advocate, and she was one of the first curators of the Great Blacks and Whites Museum. And so like I grew up, that's in Baltimore. If anybody ever goes to Baltimore and they visit, you must go visit this museum. So like I grew up, right, like surrounded by monuments to Blackness. And my aunt, being an academic, she, she like would put books in front of me and she'd be like, there are things that you will need to learn about yourself, about who you are, and about who you were before colonization. And you probably will not learn those things in school, right? And so she also fostered in me my love for history. And my mother and all of my aunties fostered in me my love for the arts and really helped me cultivate that gift. Um, I will say all the ancestors, right? All the ancestors who perhaps when I was younger, I did not know um, all of them by name, but I understood that it was because of them that I am able to exist now, that they have dreamt me into being. And it is through the gifts that they hid in my DNA. Um, and through the legacy of their lives that I was able to dream myself into being. So yeah, those are some of my inspirations growing up. And of course, Patti LaBelle, honey, Aretha Franklin, Diane Carroll, honey, Nell Carter. Uh, so yeah.
Is it my turn now?
It's your turn, sis.
I'm so sorry for skipping you, girl.
That's fine. My inspirations, they've always changed throughout the years, but like originally, I was always kind of the loner as a kid. So my original inspiration as a kid was Oprah Winfrey. Because every morning I would watch the show and I had no business. That's the thing. My grandma literally would give me coffee. So I was already destined to just be an old lady and watching Oprah Winfrey. And most of the time she always had guests on that were had stories, but she always had guests that would help you be your better self. So that's when I was introduced to Ayanna Van Zandt. So she became one of my inspirations. So I read her early on. Flash forward to coming into the scene, I didn't really know anything about gay, lesbian, or trans. So I met my girlfriend Monica, and that's when I first saw my first drag show, quote unquote. So immediately I was drawn to the female form that was supposedly born male, and that was Whitney Gaitan, Tiara Russell, and Jasmine International. And so those were the girls who I said I'm gonna become. That's exactly that's what you're supposed to look like when you come from being a boy to a girl. So I just held on to Miss Kitty, being her little sidekick. And she was the first trans person in Chicago that was known, that kind of like brought in hormones and black market silicone and stuff like that. So she's the one that kind of showed me the ropes. So she was my major inspiration, and teaching me how to go about things and doing things. But for the most part, I was like by myself a lot of times. So I was forced to just, see movies, kind of act out, in front of my mirror and be my own inspiration, to be honest with you. So I didn't really know if I was a boy or a girl. I just knew that I was different. So when I tell you who inspired me is that crazy little person in the mirror that cried by herself and it shows all throughout in the mirror. And I still do it to this day, which is crazy.
I love that. I love specifically Lady Dane and Lila, like hearing about you all talk about sort of like ancestry and history and kind of what even helped shape you in terms of like your identity and empower you to where you are. I think that is so important. I feel like that's so lost often in terms of us understanding where we've come from and what our history is before. So thank you for sort of rooting us and grounding us in some of that. Lady Dane, I feel like you wanna take over with the next question.
Yeah, I want to just reflect on what you just said really quickly before we move forward. I think that that's like so deeply important, right? That's so deeply important for us to understand as trans people, as trans women of color, right? That like we have existed like before Christine Jorgensen, right? Like before, you know, she came out, there were people like Lucy Henderson Hicks, right? Who like, you know, without her, there would be no marriage equality. She sat in front of that courthouse, honey, and she said that she is a woman and she deserves to be married to her husband. There are people like Frances Thompson in the 1800s who was an abolitionist and was a Black trans woman, and fought against so many of the white supremacist laws of that day. And so like we have been here, and before that, right, you know, there are folks who may not have necessarily been called trans, but we understand that they were trans and they existed all across this globe, all across indigenous cultures around the world. And so, you know, if people who are paying attention to this conversation tonight, if you don't leave with nothing else, know that trans people exist because our ancestors existed, honey, and we are divine. So so I just wanted to, you know, talk about that as well. That we have a history that goes, you know, beyond and before. So, you know, the next question is, right, like when is the time when you felt as though because of who you were, that you were not supported in a PWI, and dare I say, not just in a PWI, right, but in a space that was actually supposed to support you? Anybody can hop in and answer.
So even today, I don't ever feel completely comfortable. You know, I just think it comes down to tapping into a certain confidence that you know you have deep down and just adapting to your environment, not being afraid to speak up. Um, you know, but you're always caught up in what you were taught. Speak when you're spoken to, maybe not be too loud or talk too much, you know. But it's always going to be in the back of your mind, so you can fit in, you can dress the part, you can, like I said, adapt to your environment, but you're always going to still feel that feeling of like being excluded. So I don't think that ever goes away, and I don't even think there's really a space that's ever made me feel completely comfortable, unless I was with my sisters, unless I was with just all people of color, because for some reason, even when we're in the atmosphere of our own people, it's always that one white person to stick out to you because you know what they're thinking, or you think you know what they're thinking because it's just all you've ever known. So I think hopefully the time will come, but I've never felt that. I've never felt that complete comfort. Can you agree, or am I wrong?
No, I was I was wondering if somebody else wanted to hop in and reflect on that. I will, yeah, I'll let someone else reflect, and then of course I'll hop in. I don't even, and I will say this, I don't think there really are in this instance, right, any right or wrong answers. It's like, what is your experience, and what is the truth of that, right?
I'd say I like to piggyback off what Lila said, like of not being able to identify that space and feel as if there's still some work that needs to be done towards that. And I say that from like working professionally at nonprofit as a service provider. Um, and I'll take it even a step further, just being a Black trans or trans woman of color working inside a queer organization, you'll see how you are pushed to the margins as a trans person. In addition to like being of color, in contrast to folks who are white or predominantly white, I haven't really felt that safety in drag spaces. I work at predominantly, well, if you want to get a good show pay, you work at the white bar. But working at the white bar means that it comes with white bullshit, rules that are meant to tear trans people down, people of color down, police us through music, through our bodies, making sure that we must have stockings on as trans women and women of color who are curvy and shapely, or just checking how we show up or policing that or using it. Like I had an agency who they would want people of color to bear all their trauma at fundraising events, but when they showed up in that trauma or a certain way or strong or not as appeasing, they were pushed away. We all know that, you know, there's artists are supposed to be like loving everybody and come one, come on, but you know how white artists, people of color. Dane, I'm pretty sure you can, and I'll pass it over to you on that note.
Baby, I was like, yep. I think that, you know, it's like, it's one of those things where, you know, because We See You White American Theater came out, right, in June. And it felt like, oh, Lord. And it felt like everybody, like all of these theaters were being like, oh, we want to like be anti-racist now, or we want to do like anti-racist work, or we're going to release a statement, or we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And then as soon as like stuff about the election came up, right, a lot of those conversations and those bigger theaters kind of switched to like, oh, how can we talk about the election? How can we get people to vote, et cetera, et cetera. And my, you know, part of the worry is because, like, you know, just looking at time and looking at how things have gone, is that that once the candidate who everyone thinks is going to be the best candidate for all of us, which of course, folks, we all know who that is, right? They're still counting the votes as we're filming this. But that like all of a sudden, right, like my concern is that like people will once again forget trans women of color. Because like even just today, right, like another one of our sisters, it was reported that another one of our sisters was murdered. And then everyone's consumed with the vote, everyone's consumed with the election, right? And
That's
some
why
of those
people, so it's like, wow, I didn't even see that, which saddens me even more because we're just so distracted with the foolery that's going on, you know? So I didn't even see that. So it makes me sad.
and it's like, you know, so many of those like institutions who released like the, oh, we read the, you know, the notes of We See You White American Theater, we're going to do something. It's like they don't even say anything about the deaths of trans women of color. They don't say anything about the deaths of Black trans women. And that's even the New York theaters, right? Where literally, what was it, three or two Black trans women were murdered this summer. And so the thing about it is this: no matter who wins this election, the issue is white supremacy, period. And if folks are not committed to dismantling white supremacy, internalized white supremacy, and systematic white supremacy, I cannot trust that they have my best interest at heart, period. Period.
And that's what keeps you even from like, even, okay, let's say Biden is elected. I mean, is there a reason to celebrate? It really isn't. I think it's just going to bring even more of the worst out of people, you know? It's like, just because he's elected, if he's elected, it doesn't make us all of a sudden safe. No. It just, it's if anything, it's going to make everybody who's on Trump's side even kind of give less of a fuck, and kind of, I'm sure, because Trump is a showgirl, he's gonna scream even louder, you know, and he is, and he has the power to still have that platform, and kind of his voice will probably get even louder, you know, because he has such a following. So it's like there's really nothing to celebrate. White supremacy is the problem, and it doesn't matter who wins tonight.
I like to say something about vote shaming. And I'll just say I didn't vote this election season. And I made that stance because myself and others do this work regardless of who's going to be in office, right? whether this person, and I just feel like this person is interchangeable, there's still going to be all these things that are against trans women. So instead of stressing myself out about the lesser or greater of two evils, I just chose to center myself, center my art. And honestly, I feel like Trump in office lights a fire under our asses and makes us a little stronger. I feel like I don't like nothing he stands for. I would love for him to be out of office, but I feel like with him in office, it gives us something to fight, something visually to like target and fight and makes us stronger versus someone who is super nice and fake and may do a few little things, but honey, when Barack Obama was in office, they was killing Black trans women. Um, Before that, they've been killing Black trans women and women of color, and they're gonna still keep on doing it. So I focus myself on like how do we prevent that, how do we respond to that, because and then everyone has a role in the movement. Like for the people who voted, for the people who lobbied and campaigned and did all that work.
I hear what you're saying. I definitely hear what you're saying. Because we were comfortable, and Trump's forced us to get out of our comfort zone and kind of even work a little bit harder. Like I was saying earlier, like it kind of really doesn't matter. I think it comes down to us just being pushed forward as business owners, you know, so that way we do have a power. We don't rely on the government or, you know, have to work for anybody. So like, you know, like when I say that it's like I'm never comfortable, I don't mean it to complain. I just say it to say forced to get out of our comfort zones. But I can't say if he wins or loses or whoever wins, it's going to be better or worse. We don't know that. I wish we did, but we don't.
Do you, I'll kind of jump in there and say, you know, I think it's interesting that the question was about predominantly white institutions and we end up talking about the White House. And addressing, I think, Lady Dane, what you said is so important, which is really about dismantling white supremacy. I can share, and I've talked a lot about this with my trans sisters in Kansas City, and Nyla is one of those women. I have a really, I have a complicated relationship with whiteness because I am half white. My dad's white. My mom is Mexican. She's much darker than me. She doesn't get perceived as white in any way. And I was brought up in a culture to assimilate and to sort of, without even knowing it, it was never something we talked about. We didn't talk about race at all, but to sort of be safe and present, you know, in a way that was not about talking about the fact that, you know, grandma and grandpa were from Mexico, or that, you know, like we would go to the tamale house when I would go visit my grandpa, you know, he would call us mijo, mija, and like, you know, all of these things that were like part of my culture were just was like, don't talk about being from Mexico, don't acknowledge this, just don't talk about that. And it was about trying to keep me safe, which I think for me, the irony is that when I was a teenager, you know, I'd come out as gay, and my dad was already out of the picture. He was super violent. My mom had also started to get pretty abusive because also dealing with the trauma and the stress of all of the stuff that they had gone on. And so I was kicked out and homeless and on the streets and in shelters. And so my first experience with predominantly white institutions and nonprofits in that way was actually places that took me in and kept me safe. And so when I was a young person, they were really good. They were literally like, if it wasn't for growing American youth in St. Louis, I wouldn't be alive. And as I got older and I continued with my LGBT activism, I started to get brought in to predominantly white institutions and nonprofits. And actually About Face Theater in Chicago was one of the organizations and theater companies I worked with. And part of my story ended up becoming part of their main stage production of the Home Project back in like 2006. And I had my first experience there where they actually really like took my story and other youth of color story and like capitalized off it and made money, like, and didn't give that back to the young people at all, these kids who were queer and trans dealing with trauma and violence. And I remember watching a white patron come and give a check for $500 to the artistic director, and my story is on the stage, And, you know, they're like, I feel so compelled by this story. And they didn't realize that like it was me. And I'm watching this artistic director receive this $500 check, and I didn't have a place to go that night. Like I still was experiencing homelessness in Chicago. And so I think about that experience, you know, fast forward, I come to Kansas City, and when Pulse happened and the massacre of primarily Black and Latinx queer people in Orlando, there was a conversation that was thick for the first time in Kansas City about race. And I had written an article for Out magazine that was in English and Spanish about sort of the residual trauma experiencing violence and what that would look like specifically for LGBTQ Latinos. And white Kansas City, like queer folks, could not hear that. They were so pissed at me. I was ostracized for talking about race and saying that this trauma wasn't the same for everyone, that we needed to specifically look at like Black and Latinx communities. And it was interesting because I think that folks then were not open to that. And more recently, I've been able to actually start to, through my company, like do racial equity trainings and do professional development trainings. And I have this like cohort of white women right now who are all white cis women, some queer, but mostly straight, who are like CEOs and executive directors going through this leadership, basically training. And actually Mika Cole Kamensky, who's also part of the co-signers off on the Theater So White letter, is actually helping train some of that. And we had a theater company in Kansas City reach out who was like, we're focusing on racial equity. We're really interested in this. You know, the time is now. And we put this proposal together as two women of color and sent it off to them. And we talked to them, and I was like, I don't really know if they're ready for this. And sure enough, they picked an internal person within their board to lead them in this. And I think the person was probably white. And I think that there's a lot of performative activism happening right now, that people feel pressure to do something. They feel like, you know, the time is now to look like they care. But, you know, I think that a lot of us really can see through that and be like, is your action actually in place? Like, are you actually following through on this? Are your policies and procedures in place? Do you have leadership of like Black and people of color, you know, Black, Indigenous people of color in place? Or is all of this happening because you're afraid to get called out? You're afraid to be exposed. So you're doing this to sort of not have the heat on you. And I feel like, you know, even like you said, going back to the election, that's a huge part of it. I feel like, you know, it's all performative in some way. I don't fault you at all for not voting. I think that, you know, I didn't vote in the past for certain elections, so I'm not going to shame you for that. I think that the system is fucked. I think that, you know, so many people are pissed off about the two-party system and how corrupt it is and feeling like it doesn't really matter. But also like, you know, and the narrative is that's out there, I feel like, is about like, you have to vote, this is what it has to look like. And so I think that conversation about white supremacy, but also about, you know, harm reduction and restorative and transformative justice are so important to look at, to think about how do we move forward in a different way. You know, do we work within this system or do we dismantle it altogether? So those are just some thoughts I have from things that you all are sharing.
Yeah, I think I was like, do I hop in or do I? I was like, do I hop in?
Yeah, hop in, do it.
No, I was gonna say, you know, I am someone who, like, you know, I voted, right? Like I voted. I think I might have voted in every election since I was able to vote. I typically vote like Democrat, and I will say that like I I also part of the reason why also I vote right is because like sometimes there's like legislation on the books that I want to like address, right? Um which I don't think, and I also feel like in these larger conversations, right, like folks talk about they talk about like the big presidential election, but they're not talking about like local elections, right? And they're not talking about like sometimes there are like local activists and or leaders on the ballot who it's like go and vote for your good sister, your good brother, right? So that they can do whatever they have to do. But I feel like ultimately the question is always like, what, like, are we simply buying time, right? Like, is it a situation where in this moment we are buying time for ourselves, um, even if it's not comfort, right? And then what does that even look like? And also, at the end of the day, like I said before, right? This is, I might have said this before we got on the recording, but like, you know, this is stolen land, right? This is stolen land. It is colonized land. The United States is built off of the genocide of indigenous peoples and the enslavement of indigenous Africans. And until really the United States is really ready to reckon with that, and what is equally as tiring is the performative allyship, is the people who, you know, sit in our faces and say that they love us or they care about us and that they're voting for our lives, when really what they're voting for is to keep some semblance of their privilege. And so, like, at the end of the day, like, I do not have the capacity to hold the feelings, the priorities, or the energy of white people. I do not. I do not have the energy to center their gaze in my work and my life. I do not. And if you are a white person who are in my life, there are rules of engagement. And if you want to have access to my time, to my space, there is a certain level of investment that you must have in my thriving, not simply my surviving, period. And so, like, I feel like at the end of the day, as we talk about theater, as we talk about artistic spaces, as we talk about, you know, PWIs and all of these other things, like, I am not one of those artists ever who sat in a space with artistic leadership, who, whether they be Black, brown, white, or whatever, who I knew was on some bullshit and didn't call them on their bullshit, period.
Oh, for sure.
And so, like, this election, especially, right? Like, this election should have been a fucking landslide. I do not have the capacity for white tears, period. So somebody can take that and run tell that.
And because of that, we should question, honestly, I found myself questioning everybody's motives who are white people, if I'm being honest, because I don't know. I don't know how the conversations were before, but I can guarantee that there's definitely people like letting their freak flag fly and being proud of it and really not caring. And so we don't have the energy anymore to deal with all that stuff. But this is why we have to have the energy to change, kind of be active and reclaim our power, you know, and create spaces where we can be in charge, where we can give the girls like us comfortable spaces to express themselves and be artists and be free, because that's the thing. Everyone that's in power are telling us what we can and cannot do, and we have no choice but to deal with it. So we have to kind of become more powerful and do what we need to create these spaces, become smarter, become better business people. It really comes down to money, you know, because money unfortunately equals power. You know, we can say all we want on Instagram, we can say all this, but it's like we're not doing anything, and we have to do stuff if we're uncomfortable, you know. And honestly, keep our guards up at all times. There's no time to be comfortable and let your guards down and trust people. Unfortunately, the sad truth is we have to become less trusting, because at any second someone will hurt us and they want us to kind of take ourselves out so they can do no work for us to take ourselves out, whether that be physically or even to the point where we're so stressed out emotionally and so hurt because we're down financially or any other way, that now we begin to question ourselves, feel bad about ourselves, and then just take ourselves out or one another out, you know. And that's what's happening, what I've seen with the trans girls. It's like everybody's under a lot of pressure and it's our own people taking us out, you know. And of course I feel bad about that and I want to blame people, but it's like sometimes we're just left with no other option, you know? And it's like hurt people, you know? Because it's really not even the white people that are killing us girls. You know, it's our own people. And it's just like, why am I still having this conversation a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, every single year, you know? I think what really stuck out to me was and I forget her name, which shame on me forgetting the girl's name, but the one that was in was it Ohio, and she was out there for George Floyd, and then she gets, thank God she survived that. But do we remember her? Does anybody know her name? That bothered me to the core. She was out there, you know, speaking up for Black men, and she was beat up to the point where she almost died, you know. My point is we have to become more powerful, which means we have to become business owners. We have to create spaces for us girls because we're limited, you know. It's like, and year after year we see more and more younger trans girls, yet we're still left with the same exact spaces. So we have more trans women, we're overpopulated, and we have no spaces for them to feel safe. So all we have left is the world teaching them exactly what and what not to do, which most of the time they're drawn to the wrong energy. Does that make sense?
I totally agree, Lila. And
I'm tired of complaining about it. Just so you know, I always feel like I'm complaining about it. And this is me looking in the mirror, literally, because I'm in front of my vanity, looking in the mirror. Like, stop complaining about it. You need to do something. It's just sometimes I don't know where to go to even make anything happen, you know, unfortunately. Because I am still one of those girls. I am still one of the girls that are still learning. You know, I was a late bloomer, you know, so although I could become a leader, I'm still very much a follower, you know.
I think that's a perfect segue into like our next kind of question, which is basically like, what are the trans women of color and family want to lift up? And I think what I'm hearing is, and I know we all probably have like that family core trans mentorship. Like there's always a trans person that you know who's a badass bitch who you look up to. And I think a lot of our youth don't really know who that person is, or they're disconnected from that. And like you said, it's not white people that's killing us. It is POC killing trans women of color, but I feel like white supremacy pushes us to the margins and to the edge of to that. We get subjected to that, even though we're already in that. When we try to escape it, we get pushed right back, and we get pushed back further. But like, what is like some, just to light it up a little bit? Like, what are some women of color artists, badass bitches who we know who are just like really doing amazing work?
I think as we talk about trans women of color artists, I would say, you know, Aya Simone, I would say Tourmaline, I would say, of course, you know, you can have a conversation about trans women of color artists and not talk about Janet Mock or Laverne Cox, right? I think that there's a girl who dances in Seattle, Randy. She's a fabulous dancer. There is El Morgan Lee. There is Cece Swazo. Oh my goodness, child. I know, right? I know. I'm like, I'm like trying to go. You know, Jar Jones, honey. There's you know, my sister Desi Bing in DC. Those are some folks who like I am in community with, and they're doing amazing artistic work.
Yeah, and a lot of them are not on the forefront or on TV screens. A lot of them are just in our community, and they deserve to be praised. You know, I have a girl here, Reina Ortiz, Tatiana Moten, you know, and those are girls that are making a difference, you know, with not very much resources. Like they don't have any. Recently, my girlfriend Reina posted something, and hopefully you guys can add her on Facebook. She posted a picture of like the closet for all the donations for the trans girls, you know, for the upcoming season, you know, as far as coats and everything concerned to keep the girls warm. There was nothing. She had like 3 coats, 2 scarves, like nothing. And I'm like, really? What's missing is the fact that the girls don't have anywhere to go or anybody to look up to, you know, and except for the girls on TV. That's bullshit. If we're being realistic, yeah, Laverne and John, I'm not going to take away from them. They're making a difference. But really, I don't see how they're helping me, you know?
And it's almost like there can only be one or two or three kind of thing, right?
And the thing, we all know that there's a billion of us. There's a fucking billion of us, you know? It's just we always struggle with how loud we are. Do we blend in? Do we want to be passable? Do we want to be those girls, or do we want to be the sickening ones that is recognizable in the crowd? It's like it always, and it will always come down to the struggle with how I don't know, I guess maybe how flamboyant we want to be. That's the thing. We're trans women because trans women are women. There's always going to be even an underlying exaggerated femininity that we all have. But then a lot of times we try to dumb that down so we can be passable and blend in. So it's a struggle. It's like, which it shouldn't even matter. Who cares? Wear your outfit, look how you want to look, and be able to feel safe. And unfortunately, that's what we have to deal with, the struggle of it, you know, how loud we want to speak or how loud we want to be.
I do want to reflect though that like I feel like there is room for everybody, right? And there's room for everyone. And I think that like the I think that the system that says there can only be one or two, that system has been created by like white cis men. And I think that like so often, right, we demand of trans, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. I think that we demand of trans women of color, specifically, especially Black trans women often, to be the first to sacrifice anything, right? But we oftentimes are not actually holding white people to a standard of the type of privilege that they enjoy within this system. And so like, you know, as I think about like what kind of like, it's like, what is the root? What is the root, right? What is the root of the issue? And I know that I keep talking about white supremacy over and over and over and over and over again, but it is because that is literally the thing that is trying to kill us all, literally. And that as I think about a world that is free of oppression, in which we all cannot just, that we all are not just surviving, but we are all thriving. We are all being affirmed in who we are and able to do and say and activate the things that we would like to activate. That world is literally, there is no white supremacy there, and dare I say perhaps there is no capitalism. And so like I will just say that like for myself, like at the end of the day, like I do not, I will say I've learned a lot, right? About like the fact that actually I am not in competition with my sisters. I am not. What I am doing in this lifetime is hopefully dismantling systems of oppression that does not that keeps my sisters from being able to actually engage fully and presently in their lives safely and affirmingly.
Lady Dane, I love you. You need your own show.
Like, no, she does. But
yeah.
That you should, because that's how you define success. You know, it's like everybody has their definition of success, but that right there, that's how you define success. You know?
Yeah, and I just want to uplift like all three of you. You know, it's like what women inspire us. I mean, you all are amazing. And Lady Dane, I wasn't like super familiar with you until this call, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna literally be. I'm a fangirl now. I'm a fangirl. Yes, I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, you know, I really, really, really feel like so many things that you said, everyone said, but I just want to emphasize, I feel like that because you're talking about that anti-oppressive piece and dismantling white supremacy, and I want to just add to that I think also, right, patriarchy and toxic masculinity, which is so rooted in why we're being killed and why we're being hurt. and who kills us. I mean, we could have had a whole conversation about, we talked about people of color killing us, but I just wanted to name too that there are white men who kill us, there are white people who kill us. I think in terms of other fierce activists, I just wanted to name two women that I really respect and follow. I mean, Lila, you've been so monumental in helping with my transition. Nyla, you have too, but also Monica Beverly Hills would be doing a disservice if I didn't say her, and Ariana Lint and Bambi Sosalo, even though they're not artists per se, they're doing amazing work within the Latina communities, trans Latina communities. And last but not least, I wanted to just give props to so many girls and women I know who would not identify as potentially as artists, but I see them as artists and as resilient. And those are all of the women and girls who are doing sex work. I think that that is something that needs to just be named. Not that all trans women do sex work, but many of us have dipped into it at points. And I think that that is something that is valid and real and fair, and they deserve safety and love and affirmation too. And so many of them, I feel like, aren't even moving into worlds where they can be recognized because of still being in places where they're worried about survival, or they're doing sort of underground economy work because these predominantly white institutions and these systems of white supremacy will not support them or will not uplift them. So I think we're at time. But I just wanted to see if you all have any final thoughts or anything you wanted to share before we go. Yes, Nyla.
Okay, just one thing, one of my closing thoughts I would love to see a change in theater and artistic organizations, like the different mediums of art that are considered eligible, that are considered worthy. There is more to art than just visual art. Being able to sculpt things and draw things, telling your story, dancing, making stuff, creating. Like, art is not just this linear thing. And I think a lot of white institutions, a lot of artistic institutions want a fucking Michelangelo sculpture. And it's like, no. Like, literally to expand what it means to express yourself as an artist. And I just feel like they those rigid definitions and criteria are tools to just keep us out, I feel. So change it. If you all see that, change it.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off that. I'll say that my challenge I've been giving when I've been brought in to do trainings for artistic organizations around racial equity and diversity, equity, inclusion, which always for me is when I see DEI, I'm always like, that's a red flag already that, you might not actually be doing the work if you're advertising these DEI initiatives. I feel like that's sort of that propaganda in some ways. But is the idea that if artistic organizations and theater organizations could connect, that trans women of color, and that the trans women of color, specifically Black trans women, and sometimes Latina trans women who are murdered, many of them were artists and performers. If they could connect the idea that in some way these women were artists, and this sounds really crude and fucked up, but the idea that these women who are gone are also artists, I feel like they would care more. I feel like they might actually start to see a reflection in their own organizations and be like, oh shit, we should do work in this community. We should connect it. Like these people, these women whose lives have been taken from them, right, are artists, are lost artists, right? We always give reverence to the 80s AIDS artists and 90s AIDS artists and folks with HIV and AIDS that died, and we should, but we don't recognize that so many of these women who are being murdered are also performers and artists and resilient. And so that's my challenge back.
And let's not ignore the fact that even just being trans in itself is an art form. Like, you're able to be biologically male, feel uncomfortable, whether you even realize at a certain age that you're male or not, or just always knew it.
I don't identify like that, sis. I'll just say that from my own experience.
Okay. The thing is,
identify with the biology of
drawing. So when I look at, even when I realized I wasn't a girl, it was like, can you imagine what that feels like? So the thing is, so when you then to change yourself physically from a boy to a girl, that in itself takes an artist's eye. You know what I mean? Because you know exactly in your head what you want to look like physically, what you even want to feel like, because the thing is, it's all like, it works hand in hand. And then you take the steps to do so. That's creating art. We weren't just all born looking like this. And if I might add, looking at the screen right now, we all look beautiful. You know what I mean? But none of us came out looking like that. Yes, some of us have like these natural features. Some of us had to buy a few. We're all going to go through certain changes, like surgically or whatever, or whatnot. But it's an art form. We're molding ourselves into the girls that we know that we are, you know, and not being born that way. That's art, you know? And we can't be afraid to even talk about it, because even that's another art form. Just even talking about it, expressing it. They want the girls to be sex workers. And the thing is, and I praise sex workers. They're my girlfriends. I know all of, like, trust me, I respect it. However, if we're being honest, I don't think that's exactly the profession that anyone dreams of being in. I mean, and I think that the chances are slim if that's what you dream of as a kid, you know? So I think, like, we need more therapy. We need more people to find chosen families, you know, or becoming a family, or offer your support to become a family for a girl that needs it. Because really, it comes down to just even feeling that little bit of love that some girls yearn for would even keep them from making the decision to have to sell their bodies and to be sex workers, you know? Now, I can't, you never know. Some people just actually love it. I know some of my girlfriends that love it, you know? But what if that's not the case? What if it just comes down to just actually just feeling loved and needing a hug to kind of just, I guess, enforce the idea of you're better than that, you know, simply.
All right, Lady Dane, I know you have thoughts. You know you have
Oh,
thoughts.
you know,
Like,
I don't even know Lady Dane, but I know she got thoughts.
No, I was gonna say no.
Lady Dane, I'm gonna follow you on social media, so please give us.
I'll follow you on Instagram back, of course. Like, no. I was just gonna say, I think that one, we need to decriminalize sex work, right? And I think that we need to really, I think we need to create a world, right, in which sex work is a choice, and not, it's that any sex worker, right, that their relationship to sex work is a choice, um as opposed to a necessity, right? So the question is, how do we do that? I think I kind of talked about that earlier, right? But I will say this, like, I think that we also need to decriminalize sex work, because sex work is work. You know, for any of those wives who be like, oh, you know what, I'm gonna give my man some so that he can buy me a car. You are actually engaging in sex work. So just because you might have a ring on your finger does not mean that you're not using sex in order to get something from your husband. And so I just also want to put it in that context real fast. I will also,
all of a sudden it looks different.
I'm just saying, like, and so, like, you know, sex workers in very many ways, right, save so many of our lives, all of our lives who are here on this call. And so, and also, before patriarchy, sex work was in temples. It was divine. It was a whole profession that was ordained by God. And so I want to also say that, you know, shout out to Sumar, ancient Sumar. But also, you know, as I think about the world, as I think about what I want for the world, as I think about what I imagine for the world, I see a world in which every every trans woman of color, every indigenous trans woman, every Black trans woman, are living their very best life and are engaging their dreams, and are in loving community and affirming community, and celebrated for all of who they are and affirmed for all of who they are. Um, I dare I say that, like, I want theaters to actually, I actually want theaters to not simply just think of our sisters who were murdered as artists in order to activate some type of empathetic relationship to us. I want them to just be fucking good people and do the fucking right thing by us. That is what I want.
Yeah.
Just do the fucking right good thing by us. Because I think that so often we continue to ask them to see the humanity in us when there are our sisters around us who have already seen the humanity of us in us. And so they either need to get on this train of trans liberation, or they need to not, their organizations need to not survive. And it is as simple as that. Either they change or they do not survive. Yeah, so that's my closing thoughts. I've got 14 books published. Please buy my books, y'all. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I love it. Yes, we will be hopefully dropping links to our work within when this video is released, and the promos and the marketing.
Wait, Nyla, what about Nyla? Did you say something, Nyla? Did you have closing?
www.nylafoster.com if you want to book me. I'm easy.
You better.
Thank you all so much. I really appreciate y'all being here. Thanks again to everyone who helped organize this and get us here. And hopefully you all enjoyed this video and this talk.
That was an amazing conversation. Thank you so much to our wonderful roundtable participants for that. Too often, the leadership and voices of trans women of color within movements, both inside and outside of theater, are downplayed or erased, and their art is overlooked, delegitimized, or undercompensated by institutions. We encourage everyone who watched this roundtable to show some monetary love to our panelists. Supporting and loving trans artists of color means paying them as well. You can find their Venmo or Cash App handles in the chat. Thank you so much to everyone for tuning in, and take care.